Okay, so hello. Thank you for joining me, Terry and Lucinda, and for those catching the replay. My name is Joe Stoffaker. Everybody's probably aware of that. Do a little legal disclaimer. I am not a doctor. I don't have necessarily a medical background at all. I have an NLP certification and some mindset specialist certifications and a flex diet certification. So most of this has been through my own personal experience and reading a lot of books from doctors. So I'll share a little bit about my journey here. Um, my my grandma, grandpa, and my great grandma kind of set the tone for how I became this way, I guess. My great grandma, I was blessed with two great grandmas living when I was a young child, and one of them lived to be 97 in a nursing home, and her quality of life was as crappy as you can probably imagine for someone living in a nursing home. And then my other great grandma, she lived to be 102, and when we'd go visit her in the nursing home, she would say, "Let's go back to my room and get away from all these old people." So there was a very drastic difference between being able to play, go fish and the old maid with my one great grandma at 102 versus, my other great grandma not knowing thinking my father was my grandpa. And then when I was in seventh grade, my grandpa died of a heart attack. And that's what happens to Stoffakers. We die of heart attacks, and that's the way that it is. And that was like my father's mentality about it. And then in high school, my mother's mom, she was diagnosed with cancer, and she went from being this very strong, vibrant, mid 50s to as weak as my great grandma, who was 102 when they chemoed her and she received radiation and everything. And it was pretty terrible to watch. And about that same time, I was in high school, 16, and always watching infomercials to try to gain weight to play basketball. And, there's everybody on the infomercials, you're 30, the best years, you're in the best shape of your life, or 40 in your best shape of your life, or 50 or 60. And I just did not want to be the 60-year-old and figuring out how to be in the best shape of my life. So I told myself I wanted to figure this out by the time I was like 30. And then when I was 18, I compound fractured my femur, which kind of put me even more into the health side of things, going to the physical therapy, and a lot of students at lacrosse, being pre-med or pre-chiropractic or physical therapists or sports trainers, like they were always curious about my injury and would talk to me about, whatever I was able to do with my leg at the time, if I was experiencing pain or whatever happened to that. And then I got into the bar life side of things, and I kind of forgot about all this stuff. I was just, living life in the bar. And eventually I saw everybody else complaining about their problems. I was like 133 pounds, 135 pounds, pretty skinny. And I was eating a ton of calories, and people would be like, "You need to eat." I was eating a ton. I was like, "Watch me eat. You can hang out with me and I will show you what I am capable of eating." And then I moved to California, and I was surrounded by people who, were living a natural lifestyle. There was a lot more fresh food, fresh vegetables, not necessarily as much meat. The restaurants and places that you go to, for those of you who have traveled, you're well aware when you kind of go to Florida or outside the Midwest to the West Coast, there's a lot more fresh food options. And that was new to me. It wasn't 100% new to me, I guess. When I was in college, my freshman year, my mom's cousin, who was kind of like the outcast of the family, I remember babysitting his child, and they gave me, avocados and this whole smoothie recipe that I was supposed to feed their like 1-year-old. And I was like, wow, like this is how they eat. Like it was a new experience for me. and I wasn't really sure what that was, but so that kind of left an impression on me as well. And then as I dove more into learning about health, I discovered like Dr. Shealy, and he founded the American Holistic Medical Association. So a very much more natural lifestyle aspect of it. And looking at this man in his 70s, like he looks phenomenal. And there was no sign of him slowing down. And now I've known him or known about him for 15 years, roughly 14 years. And he pretty much still looks like he did the first time I came across him, which is pretty cool. And then, I started learning about Dr. Brownstein, and he was talking about iodine. So there's these certain, different little, whether it was Dr. Shealy talking about magnesium and the importance in the body in magnesium, or Dr. Brownstein talking about the importance of iodine, it sort of opened me up to needing to look at the foods that I was eating and looking for the nutritional value of these foods. And when I was in California, a lot of people talked about biofeedback, and it was like a few grand to go do it. So I never went and experienced it. But when I moved back to La Crosse, I went to an essential oil presentation. And in the essential oil presentation, I was, pretty blown away by learning about the essential oils. And then the next day I was out to eat, and one of my old bar reps was talking to me about going and doing this biofeedback with Patty. And I was like, does she do essential oils? And he said, yes. And I was like, wow, I didn't know she did biofeedback. So I ended up going out to tea with her and learning more about biofeedback. And I started using biofeedback as a way to learn about my body. I would behave certain ways, whether it was really healthy and then go and do it, or do not so healthy things like going out and drinking the night before my biofeedback appointment. And I would always learn, if I'd eaten a boatload of sugar, my adrenals would just be in the dumps when I was doing biofeedback. And it was always interesting for, she always kind of says, we read your dirty mail in the biofeedback appointments. And so I was always blown away at what she knew without me telling her anything. And I just kind of continued my journey of juicing and smoothies and eating cleaner. And in 2015, I went to the Leadership and Longevity Conference in Green Bay and became familiar with Dr. Patrick Flynn, and how, the combination of functional medicine and figuring out these nutrients and how our bodies work. And while I was there, I also met this woman who had a lymphatic detox machine. And I really didn't know much about the lymphatic system. One of the things that I learned doing the biofeedback was that I didn't have good, strong stomach digestion. So I was struggling to break down my food and assimilate it the way that it should, because I didn't have the right stomach acid. And so she was telling me to take hydrochloric acid pills with each of my meals. And it worked. I liked it. I was benefit from, using the supplements. And yet at the same time, I was like, my body should be able to do this naturally. I've been learning, the different perspectives that many doctors had, and seeing how some doctors were part of, the medical establishment. And then through some part of their journey, they started to kind of question the medical establishment. And I started to notice that was a theme amongst doctor after doctor after doctor who, was looking for a more functional, natural, healthy approach to taking care of themselves. And so in my research, trying to understand how to strengthen my digestion, I ran across Dr. Dillard, and he's an Ayurvedic practitioner. And for those that are unaware, Ayurveda is the study of life science. So it's pretty much the evolution of how humans thought they should best take care of themselves. And I thought this was pretty cool, like looking at the wisdom that was almost lost between what we know about our environments and the plants and the foods around us, because we no longer had to pay attention to those things when we could just go to the grocery store and get them. At the same time, I had been learning all how to read the labels, because there's all these things in food. And every time I thought I understood what labels were, and I'd go find a healthy marketed box and I would think I'm eating something good, I would learn another issue with how to read labels and other things that they put in our food, and how there's no laws or legalities around some of this labeling. And for instance, like MSG can be called a natural flavor. So you can be looking at the ingredients in something and wonder, like, is this a natural flavor? Like, did it come from a beaver's gland that they don't want to tell us because we'd be grossed out that it became from some beaver gland? Or are they just calling it a natural flavor because it's MSG and they don't want to tell us that they have MSG in the product? And this was pretty disturbing for me. It really, really bothered me. At the same time, Dr. Dillard talked a lot about the lymphatic system. And I'm going to talk more about that here in a second. So the body's natural detox systems, it starts in our mouth. We start breaking down our food when we're chewing it, the saliva mixing in with it, the taste buds telling our brain what is coming into our stomach, and our stomach then being able to, the brain telling the stomach what to do so that it breaks down the food the way that it should appropriately. And one of the things that I learned about the small intestines from Dr. Robert Young was that healthy blood is made in the small intestines. He says that, so from when I compound fractured my femur, everybody was like, wow, you're really lucky to be alive. Your femur produces so much of your blood. And Dr. Robert Young was disagreeing with that. He was saying that when we acidify and we're aging and we're dying, that they cut apart cadavers and then they look and they notice that their bones were producing blood. And his reasoning for that is because our blood needs to maintain a 7.365 pH balance. And if we're not maintaining that with the food that we're intaking, then our body pulls the minerals from our bones in order to maintain that pH in the body. And, learning more about the pancreas and the insulin and how that works, and the gallbladder and the liver and our lungs detoxifying things through the air, the toxins coming out of our urine, our sweat, our stools, the kidneys being a big filtering process for that. So, we got to find this balance in life so that all of these things can function properly. And that starts with removing, as many toxins as we possibly can, whether it be from our food or from our environment, to really support these organs to, be healthier in essence. And then, Dr. Dillard talks a lot about the lymphatic system. From the Ayurvedic perspective, the first area that they address in the body is the lymph system, because when there's congestion in the lymph system, then the body is going to have issues removing wastes. So the lymphatic system removes waste from every cell in our body. It regulates our immune system and delivers energy to the body in the form of fatty acids. So it's delivering the nutrients in our body as well as removing the toxins. The lymph system is a network of organs, lymph nodes, lymph ducts, and lymph vessels that make and move lymph from the tissues to the bloodstream. The lymph system is a major part of the body's immune system. Again, just kind of highlighting a few things that Dr. Dillard points out and says about the lymph system. Science has mapped the link between lymph congestion and cognitive, functional, mental health, skin health, our reproductive health, our immunity, and inflammatory concerns in the body and mind. So this is something we see and hear a lot about, right? Whether it's Alzheimer's issues and dementia or cancer, autoimmune diseases, everybody will put the blame on inflammatory conditions. And basically when we have inflammation, that's the body trying to heal. And we don't really want inflammation, but at the same time, like if there's something going on in the body, we do want that inflammation. So it's becoming aware of where we have the inflammation and what we can do to correct that inflammation. So there's 4 major causes of lymphatic congestion: stress, digestive imbalance, iodine deficiency, and the toxic environments that, I was discussing. So let's talk about the common symptoms of lymphatic congestion. Tight rings on your fingers. So you can notice your fingers, swelling. I would notice drinking, right? Like after a couple day bender, my ankles would be more swollen. Brain fog, sore and stiff joints, headaches, feeling tired, sore breasts during the monthly cycles, bloating, skin problems. The skin is interesting because the skin is arguably our largest organ, and it's going to show the, people have, whether it be a wart or whether it be moles or different discoloration things that happen within the skin. Our skin shows us a lot of signs and symptoms, basically, of something going on. Poor sleep, when it comes to our stools, everybody kind of goes one way or the other. Some people will get really, really loose stools. Other people will get constipated. When we see the bigger bellies that we see, that's a sign of lymphatic congestion in our gullet. And our gullet is the gastrointestinal lymphatic system. And that's the biggest lymphatic part of the lymphatic system in our body. Swollen glands, sometimes a lot of people can feel the swollen glands in their neck and in their throat. On, the breasts, shoulders, or the armpits is another area where they can be felt quite a bit. Asthma issues, allergy issues. I used to have allergies really bad, and it was interesting when I kind of just quit taking pills and started eating more natural things. Like, I no longer had allergies. I quit having a lot of those issues, which was pretty cool. So as a digestive and detox system, the lymph starts as a small finger-like projections called lacteals that run along the inside of the digestive tract. The lacteals absorb and transport both nutritional and toxic fat, lipids and proteins off the intestinal tract and into the lymph surrounding the intestines. Undigested proteins like gluten and casein, along with toxic fats, can take a major toll on the lymph system. Environmental toxins, pollutants, pesticides, preservatives, and heavy metals, which are all fat soluble, can slowly congest the lymphatic system. So a lot of the issues and things that we have in our modern food sources, right, with glyphosate. So in order for our small intestines to be making healthy blood, our food becomes our energy in our body, through the lymph system, and then through our blood, and then into the muscles, and then into the bones, and then into, tendons, and, it goes on. There's 7 phases, and it takes about 30 days from the food that we consume and the energy of that food to be our energy in the different parts of our body. Has anybody got any questions? Does that make sense? Okay. So that's what's kind of going on. And fat plays a crucial role in whether it's holding on to emotional things or whether it's holding on to, these other toxins that are coming in. So, one of the things that I like to say all the time and explain to people is that whether you're 100 years old or you're a baby, you're making new cells every day. And our cells are only as healthy as the environment they're being created in. And even children born in today's world, basically the children born since the Industrial Revolution, are born with toxic livers. The coal plants and the mercury, we can't avoid mercury even on our organic foods because it's in the air and it's all around us, right? So as I was learning these things from Dr. Dillard, he talked about, like what causes this congestion in the lymph system, like what happens to the body that breaks it down so that we're not detoxing properly. And like ultimately what screws us up, right? Well, our bile gets screwed up or our stomach acid gets screwed up, and vice versa. If our stomach acid gets screwed up, it screws up our bile. If our bile screws up, it screws up our stomach acid. So while I was becoming very aware that I didn't have the right stomach acid, I was a little naive to the bile side of it. And our bile is what, when the lymphatic system empties into our intestines, it's taking, the bile is what's taking these toxic fats, fat. So the toxins that are attached to our fat, so toxic fat, that's the bile's removing that from the body. So what screws up our bile? Standard American diet, basically. Bar food, potato chips, bad fats, canola oil. Canola oil is made from rapeseed, which I can't imagine why they don't call it rapeseed oil, right? But so the bile, it just gets slow. It's like a motor oil sludge. It gets thick and our body's not processing it. It's not really being removed. And so when we eat healthy fats, our gallbladder will flush fresh bile. And then that helps us start to remove these toxins. And once we start getting these toxins out of us, we can start to improve our bile. We can start to improve our stomach acid. And that's going to help make us healthier. That's being in a detoxification state versus consistently consuming foods that are not helping us improve our bile or our stomach acid. So it really boils down to, are you creating fatty liver or are you detoxifying your liver? So either way, we're doing one or the other. We're living in a world and we're having patterns where we're eating things that are causing our liver to store the fat, or we're eating the things that when we're in fat burning mode. So keto diet, for instance, is all these people have a lot of success with the keto diet when they start to take on a bunch of fat. And a lot of that just really has to do with, they weren't ever really eating healthy fats. They were eating a lot of toxic fats. So now all of a sudden, when they start getting the healthy fats, their bile starts removing the toxins from them. The way that we go about healing our stomach acid is, well, the medical medium, the medicinal medium, the medical medium guy, Bill, he says juice celery every day, right? And then Dr. Dillard talks about the 5 digestive spices: ginger, cumin, coriander, fennel, and cardamom. And each of those spices, if we kind of start putting those in all of our meals, we drastically begin to change our body's ability to detox these things. So whether we're juicing celery or we're getting more spices into our diet, and we're getting healthy fats into our diet, we really create a transformation in the body. Are there any questions? Okay, so no. Okay, I was like, I can't see anybody. I have no idea. Let's make this a little bit more interactive. Are there things that you're doing where you're finding successes in what you're doing, whether it be probiotics, prebiotics, tea, like what are you guys doing that you found to be beneficial? What questions do you have? How can I help answer some of these questions? Is there anything that I wasn't clear about?
Hey, Joe, can you hear me?
Yes.
I actually have been looking into prebiotics and probiotics, but I have no idea what's a legit brand and what's not because there's so many out there. And like you mentioned with labeling and all of this like greenwashing that everyone does with their companies, I have no idea like what a good quality source would be, I guess.
Sure. And I mean, it gets overwhelming too as soon as you start to learn, right? Because there's so
Yeah,
much information out there. So,
yeah,
I mean, when I work with people one-on-one, it really needs to be a year process, right? Like everybody wants the 30-day quick solution, or everybody wants to do a cleanse that's going to, help them and make them better. But then what happens afterwards, right? It's
right.
like the health industry is like a $73 billion industry. And 90% of people who go on to these diets end up gaining all of the weight right back because they can't figure it out, right? So the big thing when I'm helping people and working with them is really getting to understand this idea of knowing the foods that they eat that create fatty liver, and knowing the foods that they eat that is, detoxifying your liver. So
I guess also I wondered about is it burdick root or something? Or it, I'm trying to think. I had all kinds of weird issues and none of the doctors could tell me why. They just wanted to keep giving me more supplements, but my levels weren't getting better. And so it was like stomach stuff. But so I just started looking into things on my own, but it was totally overwhelming. And like I said, I don't know what stuff is legit and what's like just another like head down this rabbit hole like type of thing. But I guess supplements and that kind of stuff, like what you suggest for more of like daily vitamins, that kind of stuff, or if it should be coming from food mainly before we do supplements. I don't
I'm a,
know.
I'm a big supplement guy.
Mhm.
So I mean, personally, so the University of Milwaukee or Madison did a study with monkeys, and they would feed some of the monkeys more and they would feed other monkeys less. And the monkeys that were fed less were healthier, they lived longer. So a calorie restricted diet can be extremely beneficial versus our body having to process all of the things that we're putting in it. Right.
So
So
right now, like that, intermittent fasting is like the big thing, um, which I, I've seen people have amazing results as far as weight loss, but I don't know what their health looks like on the inside. But is that something you think is good stuff? Like where I don't know how many hours they go, but then I worked with a lady and she would wait till 10 a.m. to eat, but then she was eating like weird stuff but it wasn't, I mean, weird stuff like all processed foods. So I was like, and string cheese and all this stuff. And I was like, I don't know if that's really doing much. But she lost a ton of weight. I don't know.
so the idea of intermittent fasting, it works really well because when we go long periods of time without eating, then we're putting our body into fat burning mode. So
Okay.
when people are eating small meals throughout the day, they're never getting into fat burning mode, especially when there's some form of quick sugar. That like
Because it,
for myself, I mean, I was so skinny because my digestion wasn't actually absorbing any nutrition. And the stuff that I was eating was giving me the quick sugar energy to be able to exist, so to speak, right? And so, as I improved my digestion and I started changing these things, like my body started absorbing the nutrition and I got stronger. And, just looking at me, like I always felt like the fattest skinny kid ever. It was like people looked
sure.
at me and like, sure, I was really skinny, but like I didn't want to take off my shirt because I felt like I was a fat kid. Right. And so like the emotions of that, I would always tell friends who are on the bigger side, like the emotion is the same as me being skinny and not liking my body as much as it was for somebody who's bigger and not liking their body.
For
And,
sure.
and vice versa, the larger person was probably like, I'd rather have your problem of being too skinny. Right. But
For
like
sure.
I wasn't happy in my skin. So,
Yeah.
um, all good points and things. And to answer your question a little bit further, Terry, is everyone really has to figure that stuff out for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So the
Yeah.
first step is really the elimination diet. If you
Mm-hmm.
remove gluten, if you remove dairy, then, you know, how do you feel after 3 weeks when you put one of them back into your diet?
For
You know,
sure.
it's paying attention, like, how do you feel 4 hours after you eat? How do you feel 24 hours after you eat? Right.
Right. Yeah.
And finding, you know, did your brain get foggier, or are you finding better clarity in these things? Right.
Right. Yeah. Plus, I don't know. I don't want to go off on my weird tangents, but like I teach kids that are 3 up to seniors, so all kinds of kids. But kids are bigger now than they used to be. Like these, like elementary kids, like look like they're 20, and it's all the stuff in our food. It's gotta be all the stuff in our food. Like these little girls are walking around that look like they're 18. Like they're totally developed, and I'm like, holy smokes, this something's not good here.
I mean, the amount of hormones that are in our meats alone, right? Like
Yeah.
we're totally changing our body. Like our liver stores all of these things, whether it's for us to use it for good or whether it's not necessarily for good, right? Like our liver is going to trap in the toxins and not let them out because it doesn't want to damage our body if it can hold on to it.
Yeah.
Um,
All
and
right. Yeah.
so and then, you know, kids today, like I mentioned earlier, like they're just born with toxic livers. So unless parents are kind of learning some of the herbs side of things where they can start to help the kids, you know, get the nutrition that the liver needs so that the liver can become stronger, like that makes a big huge difference. Nicole, I see your question here about the ketogenic diet, and I'm a fan of the ketogenic diet to an extent, because if you missed this part earlier, people who are eating a ketogenic diet are now taking in more fats. And when they start taking in this higher level of fat, then their body starts pushing out the bile and bad bile and the sludgy bile. So they have healthy bile, and you know, they have a lot of benefits. But going to the gym, you know, we're in fat burning mode just sitting down right now. Just breathing is what fat burning mode looks like. When we're in the gym and we're working out, we're burning carbs. So for the people who are doing the ketogenic diet, especially when they're eating all the BS fats, you know, whether it be a type of processed cheese or it be, I don't even know. I see some people who do really amazing things on the ketogenic diet, and they just get such impressive results. And then I see the people on the opposite side of it who are trying to do it, and this is the majority of the people that I've having the conversations with, like, oh, I had success at first and now they start to struggle. They don't get the better energy. They, you know, they're not getting where they need to be. And ultimately that's the end goal. And again, that looks different for everyone. So everyone pretty much needs to start with the elimination diet so that they can start to figure out what works for them and what doesn't. Back to your question, Terry, about the probiotics, you know, that's where that changes for people too. So you can take in one type of probiotic and just try it, right? Like, what happens for 30 days if you try this probiotic? Did it help you feel better? The probiotics come with different bacteria that make up that probiotic, or different enzymes that will break it down in the body. So for instance, Dr. Dillard's 3 seasonal diet, you know, which he's suggesting that our body produces natural enzymes during seasons to help us with the foods that were traditionally in those seasons. So amylase is an enzyme that helps us break down the gluten in bread. And in the wintertime and in the fall time, our body is naturally producing higher amounts of amylase than in the springtime, right? In the springtime is traditionally when cultures fasted. Like, they didn't have enough food stored up, the next growing season isn't there, and there would be more hunger. but the body can, when we're not just constantly shoving food in it, the body heals. The science of fasting it's on YouTube. It's also on Amazon Prime. The Russians have been studying fasting since like the 1920s. And to see the success that they have with all diseases is just mind blowing. And even the amount of working out that they do while fasting in that documentary really blew my mind. Like, they have the people being active for like 2 hours a day. But the part of that made a lot of sense to me is that it's our natural movement that pumps the lymphatic system. So, by them working out and doing all of this extra moving, they're helping pump these toxins that essentially, the body's like, okay, nothing's really happening here. So if you never move your finger like a certain way to get your finger to be moving, right, then there's going to be a lot more congestion that now takes place in this finger because there's no movement pumping this lymph that's in the finger, right? And that can happen anywhere within our body where we're not getting the proper movement, which is why, the ancient cultures, Chinese and Japanese, they do their Qigong, they do their Tai Chi, and it's all of those subtle movements that are moving all of the fascia in the body. And when I said that our largest skin is, or the skin is our largest organ, and it's debatable, it's because some people actually consider our fascia to be an organ and say that that's larger than the skin. So the human body gets to be quite complex. But all of the different foods, the different herbs, the different spices, they're all supporting the chi within other organs and stuff in our body. So, when we eat it, like when I was eating a bunch of sugar and doing the biofeedback and learning that I was just killing my adrenals and I was not supporting my adrenals, and mostly stress is what also will really screw up our adrenals, right? So finding the foods that now are going to support our adrenals so that we can help get our hormones back in a balance that they should be. And things get really complex for women because every month your hormones are changing with your cycle, right? Like each week your hormones are going through another part of the process and changing. So as the more research that I did on women's health and all of the issues, whether it be the birth control changing the hormones in women, or the processed foods changing the hormones, or the bad hormones that are in meats that people are now using and eating and consuming. There's so many factors that there's not a one size fits all for everyone, right? So the best way that I found personally to pay attention to this idea of, am I creating a fatty liver or am I detoxing, right, is getting a scale where shows you your fat percentage and your water percentage. And it's not about, having the right calibrated scale. It's just about having a scale that you're consistent with. So, like sometimes I can get on a scale and it'll tell me my water weight's 50%. I can get on another scale, it'll tell me my water weight's 70%. Now, obviously, I like getting on the scale that tells me my water weight is 70% versus the 50%. But ultimately, what I'm looking for is day to day, how is that water percentage fluctuating? Am I increasing my water percentage, or am I becoming more dehydrated? And the same thing with the fats percentage then, right? Like we can get on the scale and we can look and we can see 20% fat. We can get on the scale and we can look and we can see 8% fat. And it's not that whatever the number isn't the issue. It's just that from the day to day, when you're paying attention to what it is that you're eating, are you seeing your fat percentage go down, or are you seeing your fat percentage go up, right? So right now I'm doing Dr. Dillard's biannual cleanse. It's my 6th time doing it. So it's completing my 3rd year. And this morning I ate 18 teaspoons of ghee. So that's taking in a lot of fat, but yet I'm not eating fat throughout the rest of the day. So my body is in this fat burning mode. And throughout the cleanse, even though I'm eating a ridiculous amount of fat, my body fat percentage is dropping on the scale, which again, when we have our toxins that are attached to our fat cells, when we have our emotions attached to our fat cells, if we're not burning through these fat cells and removing the toxins, and I mean, honestly, one of the hardest parts of detoxing is the mindset stuff that comes up, the emotions that pop back up, the environment that we're in with our family, you know, whether it be an issue with mom or dad, or it be an issue with the child, you know, these things, like, we hold on to them and they get trapped inside of us. And then as we're going through the detoxing stuff, we don't even understand necessarily why we're having the emotional reaction that we are. So it's as important to be paying attention to your mindset as it is to be paying attention to your nutrition, especially when starting to consider like the idea of praying for our food, right? Like giving our food the energy that we want to be consuming, right? So loving our food and praying for it before we're eating it is, you know, giving us that loving energy into our body, versus being angry with our family when we're sitting down to have a family meal and then consuming this food in anger, right? So now when we go to detox this food, we're dealing with that anger that was there and present when we were eating it. And you know, it's a little woo-woo, it's a little quantum physics, but it's completely my experience. Yeah, I mean, when I did my Vipassana retreat, and the way that you eat when you're in the Vipassana retreat, you get 2-3 meals, like you're going into fat burning mode. And the first time I did that, like I went all the way back into childhood emotions, and had to deal with a lot of suicidal thoughts that I had as a very young child. And it blew my mind because I knew all of this stuff about mindset, and I knew that I was in this horrible place. And yet when I went to talk to the instructor and be like, what is going on with me? He laughs at me and tells me, good, good, good. The process is working. And I was like, ah, you're kidding me. Like, it was funny, but at the same time, it was frustrating, right? But yet it gave me hope that like I could see the end of the tunnel. Like what I was dealing with was going to go away. But had I not really had the nutritional background that I had and the mindset background that I had, like being in that space could have been a whole lot scarier, right? Is there any other questions? Can I help address anything specifically? Okay. So with not seeing any other questions, the big thing that I basically just kind of wanted to offer people is I'm looking for people who, you know, ultimately kind of want to be doing this elimination diet. They want to engage in what's happening with them. And I'm looking to take this away from just dealing with one-on-one clients, but having group settings where people can show up and, you know, discuss what it is that they're doing in the moment. You know, if they're keeping a really good food journal, if they're paying attention to the scale, if they're, you know, having specific issues and they want to know more about general herbs that can help with, you know, this other thing that's happening. Okay, cool. Good question, Nicole. I'll come back to that, or I'll come to that right now. The biofeedback, I went to do quantum biofeedback at Naturally Unbridled in Alaska. And Patty Barsh is the owner, and she is phenomenal. She can help people figure out biofeedback and nutrition response testing. And nutrition response testing is a great way for people to know, like, do I need this energy in this food? Do I need this energy in this supplement? And ideally, we don't have to go to somebody else to ask these things. We get really in tune with ourselves and we learn a lot about ourselves, and we can become very aware of knowing, hey, this food is really going to serve me, or this food is not what I need, even though maybe it's broccoli, right? Like maybe it's a superfood for many, many people, but for your body and where you're at right now, the broccoli isn't going to help you. One way of figuring that out is food allergy testing, right? Like we can go do food allergy testing, but the biggest thing that we learn when we pay for the food allergy testing is if we have a whole bunch of foods that show up in that allergy test. So say there's 30 foods that we're allergic to, and we notice that, wow, those are the foods I consume all the time. What that's telling us is we have really bad stomach acid. So in my position of constantly investing in myself and paying for all of these other alternative things, which are cash out of pocket, I never really built up the savings to be like, hey, I'm going to go drop $1,000 on testing, right? Like I could go spend $100 on biofeedback and get the testing and understanding and learn a lot about my body without, getting the exact blood work done to tell me what my different levels were, right? Like majority of the population is deficient in magnesium. So rather than worrying about what my actual blood levels were of my magnesium, I learned that I could start rubbing coconut oil on my skin as my lotion, and my body would start absorbing more magnesium. And when you're deficient in magnesium, it can take you 8-9 months of using coconut oil twice a day to bring your magnesium levels into range. So for the people who are doing the testing, like we know these certain things, right? So I found that I'd rather stick my money into supplements than stick my money into figuring out the exact tests. Now, at the same time, like when people have insurance, which I have not had insurance for probably a decade, just because I don't believe in how they take care of us, but you can go get the specific type of blood work done, right? Like Lucinda, I'm going to use you as an example. I hope you're okay with that. Lucinda was doing some blood work testing and found out with her thyroid, right? Like she went and did the thyroid testing, and I forget which way it was, but she wasn't absorbing the iodine, right? Like one of my favorite ways of testing is iodine good for us is taking the iodine and putting it on our skin and then seeing how quickly it absorbs. If it does not absorb, then we need other herbs and we need to make some changes so that our body can now start to absorb the iodine, which was her case, right? Like she started taking, I believe, lemon balm and bugle, I think were the other one. Yeah, hyperthyroid Graves. So as soon as she started taking these other herbs, though, it was like 2 or 3 weeks later, we put some iodine on her again. And now all of a sudden, all of her body was absorbing the iodine, which is going to change drastically our ability to detox. Women, it's not just our thyroid that needs iodine. Women's ovaries consume quite a bit of iodine as well. So when you see the women that have, they're struggling to get pregnant, or the heavy bleeding, the cysts, the ovarian cysts that so many women seem to have. I mean, I was shocked by the number of classmates that I have that were in their 30s and are now having parts removed because they just don't care. They had their children and, let's just go ahead and remove those parts. And for me, I was like, no, like, let's start to detox those parts. And I get it if you don't want to have children, but like, how is our body going to adapt and how is it going to learn to detox when we're removing different aspects of it, right? Like the monthly cycle is a detox process in and of itself. So it's a huge symptom that's telling women, how healthy they are. You know, the Ayurvedic cultures, traditional Chinese medicine, like they're paying attention to the woman's monthly cycle to know how healthy she is. That's the thermometer, that's the hormone testing, that's the blood work testing. Like that tells them what they need to know without having all of the fancy technology. Are there any other online over the phone, or did you have to go there, Link? You do not have to go there. Biofeedback can be done distantly. I preferred personally being there in person. You can send some hair samples to her in the mail, and then she'll use the energy within your hair samples and put them into the quantum biofeedback. And, you know, she'll have you sit down and lay there, and she'll work on you for the hour. And then afterwards call you up and tell you things, and you'll be like, what? I did do that a few times with my dogs, because I didn't want to take my dogs into her office. Like she'll work on horses, dogs, cats, all kinds of animals, which is pretty cool. Gallbladder removed. Yeah. So having the gallbladder removed, fat is still good. But so in the detox that I'm doing, that's a common question to Dr. Dillard. Like, what do I do if I've had my gallbladder removed, right? And he still has them consuming smaller amounts of fat. They just don't come anywhere near consuming a large portion of fat, because then that's not good. And everybody who has probably had their gallbladder removed is probably really afraid of eating fat, because of, you know, the doctors will say that. Oh, that's cool. Um, so Nicole says that she is doing just fine with the ketogenic diet. Cool. Yeah. So there, you know, we can consume healthy fats. It can just be bad if there's an overconsumption of those fats. Um, any other questions? Okay. So the big aspect, again, I kind of started to say this earlier, but the big thing that, you know, I'm looking for is kind of a group of people who want to come together. They want to ask questions. They want to pay attention to, you know, the elimination diet that they want to put themselves through. They want to pay attention to the scale, and then just show up and, you know, share what's going on with you, share your wins, share your problems, and see what happens. So a website that I found, is Patreon. And Patreon allows people to kind of become part of a membership program, and it's a pay whatever you want, really. There, you know, there can be different tier levels, and I don't really care, truthfully, what someone pays. I just want people to have skin in the game. So if it's $7, you got skin in the game, right? It doesn't need to be a ton of money. But if people want to go here and they want to join me on Patreon, you know, I'm going to do more of these Zooms. We're going to get more specific about each one of these things, whether it's the iodine, whether it's the magnesium, whether it's the healthy fats, whether it's talking about the herbs and improving the stomach acid, and just really seeing specifically where people are at based on what it is they're doing. So, you know, we can kind of become a little accountability group for one another and really help one another, transform our lives, you know, being better detoxers and improving our immunity. And when times like this show up in our life, which hopefully we never have this type of crisis again with a virus, right? But people can just be a lot more confident in being an 80-year-old with a rocking immune system versus being an 80-year-old that has a lot of inflammation in the body, maybe isn't thinking real clearly, And then, you know, these scary things become a lot scarier when we don't have the confidence in our body. So for anybody who would like to join me on Patreon, I really would love that. It'd be awesome. Okay, Nicole, you asked this question actually before about the lymph detox machine. So I've got this machine over here in the corner, which hopefully you can kind of see. It uses paddles that I put on people. It's using light therapy, frequency therapy, and ozone, and it's helping kind of super oxygenate your body, and it's getting your lymphatic system moving to support detox. I do ionic foot baths, which help pull toxins out of people. And then I've got a TENS unit, which is another machine that does frequency. So I, you know, help people come up with custom plans with frequencies that then also supports their detox. I'm located in Platteville, Wisconsin, which is about 20 minutes from Dubuque, Iowa, in Southwest Wisconsin. And, you know, that's generally when people are closer and I can work with them one-on-one, you know, then that's more ways of I can be of service to help support them. Otherwise, I refer people to professionals all the time. You know, whether it is going to see like a Wellness Way affiliate because you want to have the testing done and you want to figure out exactly where you're at. You know, their big motto is we don't guess, we test. Dr. Patrick Flynn has like 3 degrees. He's created an incredible community for helping people like dial into the nutrition that they need. I refer people to go see nutrition response testing people. Usually a lot of chiropractors or acupuncturist type people will do nutrition response testing as well. Oh, cool. You're in Dubuque. Awesome. So yeah, I guess that's about all I have, unless anybody has any specific questions or I'm happy to talk more. Cool. Well, hopefully you're part of the group on Facebook, the Lymph for Life group. Lymph for Life is what I call my detox company. And so that's another area where you can kind of go and look at my Facebook page and see other information and resources, or reach out and connect with me on Facebook or anywhere else. And with that being said, I'm going to stop the recording.